I think there was a very pertinent and relevant question during the break hour. You see, we have talked about the action of the best the God possessed, which is the true work for the society. And the question obviously was, if you say that Mirabai and great Sai Baba were the great workers, how about us? And what do we do until we reach the level of Mirabai and Satya Sai Baba? Yes, that's an important question. It is not that one should work for the society after or when you reach the level of Mirabai. In fact, you can work right from now, wherever our consciousness is, but with the attitude that we are working not for myself, not with my ego, but every 10 rupees that you give to the so-called poor, every shirt that you give to that poor person, you have consciously in your mind that it's not me that is giving, it's the divine that is giving. I'm giving it for the love of the divine. Not because of my kind of a sympathy with the poor, oh, garib ka bachcha hai, kuch paisa de do. It's not that kind of a sympathy. There again what happens, your ego gets the satisfaction. Oh, I'm Amir, I'm rich and he's garib, give that. So it's not this kind of a social monetary classification. You can give money to the poor, you can help the poor or the needy, you can go to hospital and give money. But behind that money, what is that attitude? You are not a saint, I know, we are not saints. But at least we can start the process of disowning this action and saying, this work that I'm giving, physically you are sending say 50,000 rupees to a project. But always with that idea that Lord, it's thy money that I've imparted to another person where you have instructed me. So it is, you see, this very attitude, you see what the Gita would tell us, the same thing, that you are not the doer, you are not the actor, somebody else is acting through your svabhava. That is the ultimate truth of the Gita. So that can be put into practice even now as we are in our own consciousness. In fact, the more we put into practice, the more we become the Gita Yogins, and one day you'll become Saint Raman. You don't have to be Mirabai yourself, because your Swabhava and Mirabai Swabhava are quite different. And why Kabir was born and why I am born are quite different. We can't be Kabirs, and we don't want to be Kabirs. Because the divine wants in Ramana an experience, he wants in Kabir a different experience, he wants Mr. Ananda Reddy a different experience. So we are not trying to be like other saints, but each one of us can manifest something of the divine. So the attitude is what counts. Right from the beginning, you help others, but with this attitude that you are not the helper, that the divine is the helper. So this is a training for my ego, that I subdue my ego and suppress my ego and cancel my ego and offer it to the Lord and say, Lord Krishna, in thy name I have offered the money. So let thy name, let thy consciousness, let thy power work on that so-called poor. Then what is happening? We are putting an extra dimension to my physical 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 rupees. There is no more the money, but you are imparting a consciousness through the medium of the money. And what is that consciousness? A growing spiritual consciousness. That is what is called sadhana. Nobody becomes overnight a saint or a sadhak. But when we are like this, in our stage of consciousness, in our age, young age, 25, 20, 30, 40, if the youth and the rich are given this kind of a proper training, then we will understand, look, oh my God, this is what is spirituality, and this is what is altruism, this is what is philanthropy, And this is what spirituality. So you see, we don't have to be Mirabais, but we can be what we are. But we can start from now on immediately that every gesture of help is done in the name of the Divine. That will help you, that will help him. It helps both. Well, that's a good question, so I thought I should clarify that a little bit. So I was telling, if you are with me, if you have any questions, please write them on a chit and leave it with me on my table. So this is how during the conversation, during the explanation, I'll take it up. So now to come to the next chapter, next paragraph. In other words, the Gita is not a book of practical ethics, but of the spiritual life. So this is the basic thing. And as we go along, in book 2 and other chapters, you see it becomes more a book of psychology. Of course, spiritual life is basically psychological. Because when we speak of spirituality and yoga is nothing but practical psychology. So if this is practical psychology, so Gita is a book of practical psychology and not of ethics, not of religion. And because it's so much practical psychology, today management can bring out a theory of psychology. Today psychologists can find out what is the true Indian psychology. We don't have to go to Freud and Jung and all that Ken Wilber. We have the whole thesis here. And when the West is reading the same book and coming out with their own version of psychology, not quoting the Gita, we take that book and say, oh, is a great psychologist, is looking like similar to Indian Gita. But Indian psychologists are not at all interested in going deep into this Gita. Well, I know I've seen in the market a few attempts of Gita as a management, book of management. I've seen last 5 to 10 years, there's a trend, some people are coming out. But I wish to see somebody coming out Gita as a book of psychology. And those of you here who are into integral yoga, integral psychology of Shri Aurobindo, you will have a better footing to take up the Gita as a book of psychology. Even Shri Aurobindo takes into his own integral psychology a lot of the Gita. Because a book based on psychology is eternal. Why eternal? Because like the Vedas, they are not a religious book. We think that they are really, Veda is a great religion. No, it is pure knowledge. Ved per se is knowledge. And knowledge doesn't belong to any ism, Hinduism or Buddhism or Christianity, no. It is there given. But a knowledge given, not written up in the skies to be followed eternally. Yes, to be followed eternally within yourself. Why is the Veda eternal? Because it is connected with a human being. And a human being eternally grows and evolves. Right from the Vedic times till now, man has evolved. And Veda is one that is connected with your evolution spiritually. That is why we cannot interpret the Veda. There are people again who have interpreted Vedas and the Upanishads. But again, thanks to Shri Aurobindo, he connects the Vedas to your own inner being, just like he's connecting the Gita. So, we see those eternal pearls of how man can develop. And I've read this book and I've explained this part 2. We have had long classes in part 2 for 28 chapters. I wish I had the time. If I had this knowledge when I was young, I would have taken my PhD and 10 PhDs on the Gita. It was so wonderful, so deep. That's why, in our university, I would like to encourage students to come up with this project and say, look, do something new and not just compare Wittgenstein with Ken Wilber and Ken Wilber with Shankaracharya. I said, okay, we have a lot to dig up. We have a lot of pearls and diamonds here in this book. So, I keep saying that, but I have yet to see a student come up saying that, okay, Dr. Reddy, I will take up. Gita and psychology. That will be a great contribution to our Indian psychology and especially for our culture. So the modern mind is just now the European mind, such as it has been after having abandoned not only the philosophic idealism of the highest Greco-Roman culture from which it started, but the Christian devotionalism of the Middle Ages. These it has replaced by or transmuted into a practical idealism and social, patriotic and philanthropic development. You see, of course, as you know, Shri Aurobindo wrote this in 1914, almost 100 years back, when we were deeply with the Britishers. So he says, we have been influenced by this European mind, and what is that European mind at present, especially what Shri Aurobindo writes? It has got rid of God. And we all know today, God is dead. It has got rid of God or kept him only for Sunday use and erected in his place man as its deity and society as its visible idol. You see, now we get into a bit of a deeper level of the same social dharma and the same concept of duty. You see, why have we lost God as the center of our life? You see, because this European mind, they got rid of their own religion. You see, because Christianity was not satisfying the growing modern mind. So they got rid of God, and in the end of 19th century, they brought a new ism called the Humanitarianism. And in that Humanitarianism, man became the God. So he would say here that in his place, man as his deity and society as its visible idol. So just like you go to the temple and do a puja to that idol inside, be it any god, so that idol became the society. So the Western world says God is up there, somewhere, watching after having created this earth and heaven for 6 days, is still resting. Man is important. And this was the kind of the socialism that came into India also. When in those times there became Manava Seva is Madhava Seva. You see how we got influenced by this Western society. We said to serve man is to serve God. That is because it's the West which brought in, instead of Christianism, Humanitarianism. But India, unfortunately, was swept by this wave of to serve man is to serve God. But we needn't have done that. Because for us, Hinduism was not dead. Because for us, God is not there. Because for us, God is here. God is in the leaf. God is in matter. God is in that animal. God is in that bird. So we needn't have gotten rid of God and kept the human being as the center of our religion. But again, the same wave of democracy, same wave of humanitarianism, same wave of, freedom of the individual, rights of the individual. Today everybody speaks of the rights of knowledge, rights of, information. We're all talking about the rights. Nobody speaks of the dharma. Our constitution has written about the rights of man. But where is the dharma gone? So, Gita, you see, it throws up so much of new idea. So we have to come back to the Gita. In our politics, in our psychology, in our sociology, the basic concept of dharma. So that is where Shri Aurobindo is telling, unfortunately, this ideal was implanted on Indian mind, and we, trying to be modern, we said, yes, man is important, not God. And so today man became important and the individual became most important. I am man, I am woman, I am important in this society. So my name, my fame, my comfort, my pleasures, my relaxation, my environment, my entertainment, mine. So you see, it's a beautiful analysis how slowly materialism has brought in man as a center, forgot God, and now God has become more a ritual, a kind of a ceremony. We pay him a kind of a respect on certain days, on puja days, on this days and that day. But the real spiritual element is gone. We have made it into celebrations, and all that is lost. So when we say the influence of the West, it is this main humanitarianism. So today, in the name of democracy, in the name of all this, we have lost the Godhead at the center. And that is what Shri Aurobindo would like to bring back through his integral philosophy, integral yoga, that man is the center, and God is the center of our life. In Savitri, those of you who have read Savitri, you will know that God is the key to all problems of our life. And this God as the key is what Shri Aurobindo in all his writing is bringing back. So you can see the shift in this consciousness is from the man-centered to God-centeredness, which was there originally in all our philosophy and religion. But because of the swing of the West, we are losing that, and Shri Aurobindo is bringing back that swing to all his writings. So here he would say, at its best it is practical, ethical, social, pragmatic, altruistic, humanitarian. What is at best? The modern society. So it is practical, ethical, and we all go for pragmatic, We say this is more pragmatic, we should do like this is what is going to help. So in the name of pragmatism, we sacrifice everything else, and in the name of altruism and humanitarianism, we forget everything else. So these have become, as Shri Aurobindo writes in another essay, the Godheads of materialism. He speaks of the 5 Godheads. In fact, in our first book itself, we have dealt with these 5 Godheads. The 5 Godheads of materialism. Like we have freedom, like we have liberty, we have humanitarianism, we have ethics, all this practical reality. So you would say, now all these things are good, are especially needed at the present day. So Shri Aurobindo is not that kind of a, radically saying, all that is humanitarianism is wrong, and what modern society is doing wrong. They are good, are part of the divine will, or they would not have become so dominant in humanity. That's a wonderful reason. He says this humanitarianism has come as a will of the divine and become part of the divine will in evolution. That is the greatness of Shri Aurobindo, how he integrates every development of human consciousness into the wider plan of evolution. So he finds a meaning. This humanitarianism that has come as a center of our consciousness, maybe it has wrong influence and effects, but it is a necessary growth of human evolution. You look at him, he says, it's part of the divine will, or they would not have become important. If it's a small movement, something, in a little town you do, is not so important, so it doesn't become worldwide. But today, materialism has become worldwide because there is a meaning, there is a purpose. And humanitarianism has become worldwide because there is a meaning. And why man has become the center of human consciousness is also meaning. Because you see, in the name of God, the downtrodden were never looked after. You see how it becomes necessary that today, in the name of democracy, call it, in the name of the rights of the common man or whatever, today the poor man is at least focused upon. Although socially we say, what is this OBCs, what is this BCs, what is this backward class, what is this? It is a jerk sometimes we feel, why is this Indian society getting divided into so many groups and classes? We had 4 classes to begin with, and then we have got 400 classes to end up with. But did not medicine also specialize? We had one physician 50 years back who could look after your eye and ear and stomach and leg and intestine. But instead of that, we have got 40 different doctors who have come in. One who looks after the ears, somebody says the nose, somebody says the throat, somebody says the stomach, somebody says the arms. So this is how there is a kind of a splitting everywhere. Why? Why is the specialization? The doctor, the ear doctor has a perfect knowledge, or at least a great knowledge of the subject. That means there is a focus of consciousness on that particular group so that we get more knowledge of the ear. Similarly, our Indian society is unfortunately so-called, but it is a necessary movement. Because man has become important, every person of every level is important now. We cannot say those are the backward classes, untouchables. And woe to them who still go by this untouchableness, backward classes. We distinguish, lower class, higher class, upper class. Shri Aurobindo has gotten rid of all that. And so, in a way, what Shri Aurobindo is telling us is what humanitarianism has been brought by the West is not to be condemned. It is a passing necessary phase in human evolution where man, the poor, the weak, the downtrodden, the underdog has to be given importance. For centuries together, we have made them suffer. The women were suffering, the backward class. Even now we oppress the women. So in the name of religion, we oppress women. We subjected the backward class saying, Shudras, you go out of the village. Why? Are they not human beings? On one side you say Vedanta that all this is Brahman and all people are Amritasya Putra. And when you wake up you see the Shudra is outside there. It says, don't come into my room. Even the shadow of the Shudra should not fall on me. What is this nonsense? So you see, we have had a great philosophy, but badly followed. So, this Western movement of humanitarianism is of great importance. But in India, we don't have to do it at the cost of losing Godhead. That is what we want to say. Humanitarianism per se is very important, but not throw away God. Because how would we synthesize? That in the same Shudra, there is the Lord Krishna seated in his heart as much as seated in the Brahman. So we see the divine in the Shudra or in the Brahman. That is the synthesis of India. We don't have to throw overboard Godhead like it was done in the West. We rather see the Godhead within the Shudra and within the Pariya, within the downtrodden, within everything. If we can bring this spiritual knowledge, then you see there may be classes. They're good for the social, economic development. But we can synthesize in that grand philosophy of the Vedanta that all this is verily Brahman. Otherwise, we are just following blindly the Western materialism and throwing overboard the divine. So Shri Aurobindo would say here, nor is there any reason why the divine man, the man who lives in the Brahmic consciousness, in the God being, should not be all of these things in his action. He will be, if they are the best ideal of the age, the Yuga Dharma, and there is no yet higher ideal to be established, no great radical to be effected. And this is a good concept, in fact a new concept, Yuga Dharma. You see, the Yuga Dharma now is humanitarianism. That is why we should all adapt ourselves to the Yuga Dharma. What Arjuna had to adapt was a Yuga Dharma, a Dharma that was being brought in by Shri Krishna anew. Asceticism was the Yuga Dharma at his time. But Shri Krishna is bringing a new Dharma, a new consciousness, wherein you integrate whole life. So Yuga Dharma, one who follows the Yuga Dharma would be the right instrument of the divine. And that is why we have the difference why Shri Krishna chose Arjuna and not Dharmaraj for his instrument. Dharmaraj was the Dharmaraj, the king of the Dharma of his times. But that was a Dharma of the ethics. of which Dharmaraj was a perfect icon. But Shri Krishna was not establishing ethics. He was establishing a next step of spirituality, for which Arjuna was more suited than the Dharmaraj himself, Yudhishthira. So that's why he says Yuga Dharma is important, we should follow that, and in fact Arjuna is called upon for the great new Yuga Dharma. Now this is a para that become a very important first line itself. It says, the point here is that the modern mind has exiled from its practical motive power the two essential things of which I spoke to you, God or the eternal, and spirituality or the God state, which are the master conceptions of the Gita. So this is what Shri Aurobindo is repenting, that from the West, in the form of humanitarianism, we have brought in this, unfortunate thing, the exile of God. What we said, here also we said that we have gotten rid of God. And we have gotten rid of the spirituality because we have brought in materialism. And these two are the main messages of the Gita, that the divine is within you and you live a spiritual life. A spiritual life means a life in which you live in the world and become spiritual, and not a life in which you escape from the world, become an ascetic and try to get the realization of God. So he says, unfortunately, these two things, the most essential things of the Gita, have been neglected, and it lives in humanity only, and the Gita would have us live in God. Though for the world and God, in its life, heart and intellect only, and the Gita would have us live in the spirit, in the mutable being who is all creatures, and the Gita would have us live also in the immutable and the supreme, in the changing march of time, and the Gita would have us live in the eternal, etc. So I won't cover the passage, but this is the basic thing, that we live in the world for God. We live in this world, and in these creatures we see the entire divine being, and in practice the lower in us must learn to exist for the higher, in order that the higher also may in us consciously exist for the lower. So to end this para, the main idea you have grasped here, that Gita is strongly emphasizing upon this concept, God within the world, not God outside the world. This is the essential thing. Now the question is how to do that. Well, this whole of this 18 chapters, 700 verses are precisely this, how to have this realization of God in the world. That means Gita gives you a very practical solution what you are asking. The whole of Gita is just that thing. That how do we maintain our earth status, that means so-called our mundane status, and yet be God-oriented. What Shri Krishna tells Arjuna is, established in me, do thou fight in the world. That is the mantra. That you be in my consciousness and also work in the world. So now the whole question is how to be in his consciousness and yet to work upon. Because normally we say, to be in his consciousness, you go to the mountain. But he says, no, I will teach you how to be in that consciousness. So this is the misfortune that has happened, but we have to rectify. Therefore, it is a mistake to interpret the Gita from the standpoint of the mentality of today and force it to teach us the disinterested performance of duty as the highest and all-sufficient law. A little consideration of the situation with which the Gita deals will show us that this could not be its meaning. So let's not please quote the old mistake that Gita teaches us disinterested service. That Nishkama Karma, we say, oh, Gita's highest teaching is the Nishkama Karma. But that is, Nishkama Karma is not this, what we say, this disinterested performance of duty. You see, most of us Indians, we have just quoted that, and when we ask the meaning, it's disinterested work. But disinterested duty is not the last message. You do your work. Keep to the God orientation. But, he would say, for the whole point of the teaching, that from which it arises, that which compels the disciple to seek the teacher, is an inextricable clash of the various related conceptions of duty, ending in the collapse of the whole useful intellectual and moral edifice erected by the human mind. In human life, some sort of a clash arises fairly often, as for instance between domestic duties and the call of the country or the cause, or between the claim of the country and the good of humanity. So when you say do your duty, then there's a clash. Which duty? You say, I have a duty as a husband, I have a duty as a father, I have a duty as an employee, I have a duty of a management, and as a duty of a citizen, duty of a humanitarian. So there's a question now, if you are a professor in a college, then your duty is that of a professor, as we say, the dharma of the teacher. But then, say he gives example of, for example, the lawyer. You see, the lawyer and the soldier, what are the duties? The soldier's duty is to kill the enemy. If the enemy attacks you, not just go and off the track, you do that. But if your country is endangered, then the soldier's duty is to finish the opponent. Now, ethically, morally, is he right? You will say, no, as per his duty, he has to kill. Fine. That is what we understand by the duty. As a teacher, as a professor in your college, it's your duty to attend classes every hour and teach your students. Lovely. That is the duty you have to do. But then, if there is a higher call, and that's where the question comes, if there is a higher call. For example, he would quote here of the Buddha. When Siddhartha was there, he had a beautiful wife, a very beautiful son, a lovely kingdom. And if you said, no Siddhartha, your duty is to become the king. You are a prince now, soon you will be the king. As a prince, your duty is to rule the country perfectly, your kingdom. But he had the call. Suddenly he decides to leave the whole thing. Then as per your duty, would you call him back and say, oh Buddha, no, Siddhartha, your duty is to become the king. You cannot be going to the forest and do the tapasya. Would you call that duty important? Or what the Buddha did? When he heard that inner spiritual call, well, he has left society, we know that. But for what purpose? In response to a higher call. And today, because Buddha left that in response, that we have Buddhism, and millions of people are benefited. And then we have another example of Sri Ramakrishna. You see, he says that do you want him to become a Pandit? Because he was from a Brahmin family. You say, no, Sri Ramakrishna, you should not go into the temple, become your Pandit. But Sri Ramakrishna heard his inner call, his call for the deity, for the goddess, for the Durga. And he gave his life for that. So has Sri Ramakrishna become one more Pandit according to the duty of his family? You wouldn't have had Sri Ramakrishna. And of course you have the great example of Vivekananda himself. He has a family in great misery. I mean, they did not have food in the next meal. And when Sri Ramakrishna tells Vivekananda, you go into the Kali temple, Durga temple, and ask the mother what you want. Did Vivekananda ask for what he wanted? That I want riches, I want wealth, I want food, I want clothes for my family? He could not. He went, stood in front of the deity, and when he comes out, Sri Ramakrishna says, hey, ki jesh korichish? What have you asked the deity? He said, nothing. He says, go back, go once again and ask. Comes out again, nothing. So why? Was he unfaithful to his family? Did he not love his mother and his family? Or because he was having this inner call for this higher life, he asked the mother for a higher life and not the maintenance of his family. So this is what Shri Aurobindo is telling us, that there is a point, nay, although the Gita prefers action to inaction, it does not rule out the renunciation of works but accepts it as one of the ways to the divine. If that can only be attained by renouncing works and life and all duties, and the call is strong within us, then into the bonfire they must go, and there is no help for it. The call of God is imperative and cannot be weighed against any other considerations. So this is what Shri Aurobindo would argue, that when the call comes, that is the sarvadharman parityajya. Then you can abandon all your so-called duties of the husband or the father or the teacher or the pandit. Then for a while you can abandon the works. But Vivekananda came back to a tremendous work. And we have the Buddha, of course, you know, for so many decades he walked across the roads, across the countries of India, regions of India, to spread his message. He did not, withdraw after his enlightenment. He did not go into a cave and left his life. He came back to a more dynamic life than any man upon earth. And the influence he has had is, you can see, you cannot compare. So this kind of a withdrawal was there necessary for a realization, but he was the most dynamic and the most influential person that was born upon this earth. So Buddhism may be something, but the Buddha himself was an absolutely dynamic personality. So he says, what is that question of duty? If you say, I'm an officer, I'm a this, I'm that, and I must do my duty, okay, don't leave it. But if ever there is the call of the divine, then don't think. Even to the ashram we have had such cases in these early times when Shri Aurobindo and the mother were there in the physical. Many sadhaks left their families, their wife, their children. The moment there was the call, our mother and Shri Aurobindo would say, yes, you can come. And subsequently something was arranged for the family. The families never died of starvation. That also the mother and Shri Aurobindo saw that the family is looked after by some means. But the soul, the husband or the wife, when they really was responding to this inner call, they said, that's more important. So we have quite many cases in the ashram who did that. But also, the families never suffered. Their families prospered, and the children later on came in, the wife later on came in and joined the ashram, whatever. But what we mean is, the call of God is imperative. So this concept of duty, for the sake of duty, you sacrifice your life, sacrifice your God, sacrifice your religion, sacrifice your spirituality, that's what Shri Aurobindo is contesting. But here, there is this further difficulty that the action which Arjuna must do is one from which this moral sense recoils. It is his duty to fight, you say. But that duty has now become to his mind a terrible sin. How does it help him or solve his difficulty to tell him that he must do his duty disinterestedly, dispassionately? So would you want Arjuna to go back and fight in the state of mind that he was in? He said, no, you are a soldier, you are a kshatriya, go and fight. But here was an awakened man in whom, what we say, the call of God was there. So Arjuna says, now look, I am a kshatriya. But to be a kshatriya is a sin, Now, after all these years of being a Kshatriya, suddenly something sprouts up. So, would Lord Krishna send him back in the sake of duty? But then you say, he is told that he has a right on his side, but that does not and cannot satisfy him, because his very point is that the justice of his legal claim does not justify him in supporting it by a pitiless massacre destructive to the future of his nation. Is he then to act dispassionately in the sense of not caring whether it is a sin or what its consequences may be, so long as it does his duty as a soldier? That may be the teaching of a state, of politicians, of lawyers, of ethical casuists. It can never be the teaching of a great and religious and philosophical scripture. You see, Sri Krishna was not a politician like that. To say, no, Arjuna, it's your duty, go and fight. Because the situation of Arjuna was real. He was not pretending. He was not a coward. He was not running away from the Kurukshetra. You see, we may abandon duty in many of these things. Either we call it a cowardice or some kind of a sin or something else. But Arjuna, in him there was an awakening of a higher spirit, which he is not able to recognize. But he gives it the form of a kind of an ethics of sin, of this and papam and punyam and all that. But essentially there is an awakening. So Sri Aurobindo says, we can't. Sri Krishna could not have sent back Arjuna as a politician or as a lawyer and all that. But ultimately we see that Sri Krishna sends him back. What is the difference? Does he say, go and fight because it's your duty? No. Sri Krishna sends him back now with a greater understanding and in a higher consciousness. You see, otherwise for Arjuna to kill all those people, he could have never killed. He says, it's impossible. How can I kill my Gurudev? But after the Gita, he is ready to kill. Why? He gets the jnana, he gets the wisdom, he gets the knowledge of the reality of this cosmos, of this working. When he sees the Vishwarupa Darshana, he sees what? That all these Kauravas and many of these Pandavas are already killed. Time the destroyer. He sees in the Lord's mouth all these thousands of soldiers being swallowed up. And Sri Krishna says, look, all the war has already taken place up there. You are not going to kill them. They are already killed. It's only now on the physical level your arrow will be used. But otherwise, all these people are killed. So when Arjuna gets the knowledge, this is what is called knowledge. And this is the knowledge that he is going to give to you and me through the Gita. That you think that you are the worker, that you are the manager, that you are the professor, that you are the teacher, that you are the businessman. That's a wrong understanding. The real doer is he. He is the person who is acting through you, through your ego, through your instrumentation. But you are not the doer. So the same thesis that was given to Arjuna is being given to us through Arjuna, the wider philosophy that it is an ignorance, avidya, an illusion to think that I am the doer. Because if you think I am the doer, that means my ego is the doer. And as long as you think that you are the doer, you bear the consequences of your action. Sorrow, suffering, illusion, this kind of pain and disappointment, depression. All these things come why? Because you think you are the doer. So if you think that you are the doer, that you are going to kill those Kauravas, you will get papa and punya. You see the logic? If you think that you are the doer, you will get the papam. But Lord says, that's not it, Arjuna. I am the doer. So leave the question and papa punya to me. I will take care. You be only my instrument, my arrow in the world. When you shoot an arrow, the arrow does not think that I am doing papam or punyam. It is the arrow or the archer who's just throw the arrow goes and hits the target, the person is killed or injured, he doesn't know. Who knows is the archer. So Lord Krishna says, you are my arrow, I am the archer. So you have no sense of sin and virtue, because I am the person looking after this world. I have already fought this Kurukshetra, it is already destroyed. So you see how Arjuna's mind is now changed. From the I as the doer, now he understands Krishna is the doer. That is the secret of this Gita. And that is the teaching, the core of the message, the core of the teaching. So, but it is easy to quote the Gita. But to realize that I am not the doer, that the Lord is the doer, it takes a long time, my friends, I can tell you that. Because every time there's success, immediately your collar goes up and says, hey, look, Dr. Reddy. But every time there's a failure, you say that Mr. X is responsible. This is all the ego, but slowly when we practice this over the time, each time remembering, then the consciousness of the doer changes into the consciousness of the instrument. Then you say, oh, I am only the arrow, the archer is the Lord. Then there's a third level where Lord says, you are neither the archer, you are neither the instrument, nor the doer. I am the arrow, I am the archer. That is where he says, I am the whole thing, Aham Brahman. I am the Lord, I am looking after all the works. These are the three stages of sadhana, yoga of the Gita. The doer, the instrument, and then you say the Lord is everything. So when Arjuna comes to that level of consciousness, and the 700 verses are a period of a transformation of Arjuna's consciousness. Essentially, we think it's a question answer, there are one verse after that, and suddenly there's Vishwarupa Darshana again. Arjuna asks questions, what is this? It's only in chapter 18, then it says Manmanabha Madbhakta, then it says Sarva Dharman Parityajya. The real last only two verses are the message of the whole Gita. 700 verses are a preparation. Only 2 verses are the Adesh. So this is not a preparation, it's a time of transformation. We may take 70 years or 700 lives, but that's the message. That is why the Gita's message has to be put into practice in our lives. Then when we become Arjunas in the consciousness, then you may kill anybody, you may do anything, you are not the doer. But if you go and kill somebody, says, no, it is the Lord Krishna who killed through me, then you see how many bars are there in the police station, you start counting within 2 hours. Because that is the egoistic consciousness. So, let us not act hastily saying that I am Arjuna, I have also become like Shri Krishna's consciousness, I am not the doer, Shri Krishna is the doer. You would be committing an error, a stupidity, a fallacy. But so this is called the spiritual growth. And that is at that level that Shri Krishna has released Arjuna and says, now you go and act. You see the difference between the first act is out of ego. Second action is egolessness. So can we be egoless? Now you would say, until I become egoless, can I not act? No, you have to. It's through action that you become egoless. Every time you act, you invoke the divine. Lord, this is for thee. Now it's my ego. But you will see in life that if you're conscious of this, slowly your ego diminishes. Because the Lord's influence comes on your life every minute. But every time we have to offer ourselves. Lord will not come and diminish your ego by Himself. It is always, when do you say this kind of a gesture? Giving, offering. We should do this pranam. All these are gestures symbolizing that I am giving to the Lord. Partake of that. So the Lord takes. He will not enforce anything from you. All the Gita is given into you. But you have to practice it. So this is the transformed Arjuna that comes into being. And therefore we will see, and what are the concepts. And now once he has given us this argument of the different misunderstandings, the misunderstanding of Arjuna, now in the next couple of pages, or the next second part of this chapter, which we'll take up tomorrow, we will see the real teaching of the Gita, the core of the meaning, and then actually what should be our attitude, and what are one or two central points. So half of this chapter has been kind of, to clear up some of these misunderstandings. The second half is the real core of the teaching. So we will take tomorrow